is Michael Sandoval.
And I'm Chris Stetzel.
And welcome once again to another Peers Over Beers podcast. And we are truly having a beer today.
We are.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
So we were just finishing up a topic on content, right? And there was some interesting topic we were going in around how do you sell, the community. You were one of the things I have to hand it to you was your ability to kind of get in front of people and talk about the value, right? And I had mentioned at the very end that it was really hand-to-hand combat, right?
Yeah, it was.
And kind of as a catch-up, we were talking about was content strategy around one of those areas was around finding tribal knowledge and talking to those who had the knowledge and getting them to contribute to the community.
Yep.
And you were slightly going to this idea of how you did it, right? Can you tell me a little bit about one in particular, one case in particular that's worked for you and what you did to get them excited?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them, but one of the things that I did, and it was kind of a lot of fun, but it took a lot of time and effort. And as a matter of fact, this guy was in Germany. And so, one, I couldn't speak the language. Two, I had to find somebody that could speak that language, but also English. So what I did was I worked with the e-commerce team in Germany, and I was like, hey, look, I need somebody that is an expert in what we call automation or KNX and these things. And so this woman, Marion, super awesome, if she's listening. But she found me this guy, and so I talked to this guy. He knew English a little bit, and so I let him know and what I was doing. He seemed very excited about, creating content and those things. But the problem was, it's actually getting people to create content. Does that make sense? So
no,
it's really difficult. If I say, hey, you want to write a blog? And they're like, well, yeah, but it takes a long time. How do you do that?
Yeah.
So what I did was, and maybe you came up with the idea, I don't remember, but things I do today, whether or not whoever came up with it, we went to a place. I went to a place called Upwork. Oh no, not on that one. We didn't, right? We went to some other place.
No, I remember pulling. I think we started. I remember at least. I think it was for this one. I posted something on Craigslist, and we had a content writer. But that was for something else.
No,
earlier.
we went through some agency to get this person.
Oh God, no. Okay,
Yeah. So we went through this agency, and so what we were looking for was somebody that was in the U.S. Yeah, it was Aquint.
Yeah.
Somebody that was in the U.S. but knew German very well. It was a native German speaker and also knew English. And so we found this guy that was really good. I forget his name, but anyways, we basically interviewed the German guy from Rexel or Hagemeyer at the time, and we pushed out like 10 plus pieces of really long content, that was really juicy for SEO, and we put it under his name. The other piece, so there was a lot of wiki articles, which was really good, and there's product related and things like that. I mean, this stuff became. At first, we didn't know if it's going to work, but this stuff became really, really juicy. And I was like, what else we can do is, can we create 10 or 15 questions and answers around these wiki articles? You're like, yeah, go ahead. So what I did was I had somebody post the questions, and lots of questions, like 10 or 15 questions. I think it was 15 on the grid. And then I actually had the answers, so it was good. So I logged in as the expert and then posted it as him. And so we got extremely good content. And then I created a couple blogs around those Q&As and things. So, from a content standpoint on that one topic, it was extremely good. But, the content was really good, but that person was really excited. And then I had a couple of other people that were wanting to do some of that as well, because that person would tell them how easy it was.
Yeah,
or
because we had somebody
whatever.
write it.
Yeah, you have somebody write it. I mean, really, that's the way to do it at first. Because if you don't have a staff, like even at the company I'm at today, it's just me, and so I have to do some of those same tactics to drive content.
Yeah, and not it's writing is not a natural thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I remember somebody asked me, like, I don't know if it was my boss or even as of recent, I was like, Chris, are you going to write some of these things? Hell no, I'm not going to write this. Like, I'm the last person that knows anything about security or anything like that, right? But I can find somebody that can do it pretty easily and just pay them. So you give me the budget, then I can make it happen.
Yeah, we were talking about this too, with this idea that they don't want to talk to me. They don't want to talk. They want to talk to the guy who actually made the product.
Yeah, they want to talk to, Bill that is actually the electrician or knows a lot about the products or is an expert in those kinds of things. I'm an expert in building a community and setting up a strategy. Yeah. I'm not the expert in writing all that shit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's I think that's a misconception. I don't know if you've seen some of those back in the day, like the job descriptions of a community manager, and some of it is, you must write content, be an expert in all these things, writing, et cetera. And I'm like, yeah, not really. That's not really what, you want them to build a strategy. You want them to be on the forums. You want to do all these things. And I think that's just a misconception of what we actually do. Anyways, that's another topic.
No. It was quite germane. Because I think there are, community managers listening now who are, I don't write. I mean, yes, I can write some stuff, but it takes
very
time.
Flowery.
Yeah.
It's an inside joke.
Inside joke. I can write some very flowery stuff, but it takes someone with talent and someone with that is their core competency to do it, right? And it's good to have people, if you have a larger community organization, where you have on staff someone who is writing original content.
Absolutely.
That is very valuable, because then they can do this thing about interviewing individuals, writing up scripts to do videos.
Yeah, I don't have to go find somebody to do it. They'll go do it themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, I've worked at 10 companies before where a lot of the white papers that are written from engineers weren't written by the engineers. They were actually written by professionals. Yeah. They just interviewed them.
Just interview them. Yeah. Send them to, what I do is I'll interview them, or I'll have the content writer interview the person. I'll be on the phone. I'll record it and then send it to the content writer, and they can write up 5 or 10 blogs. I mean, I think that's really the way to do it.
Yep. So I know we started talking a little bit about how you would convince people, but we're kind of actually going into this idea of how we generated content in Germany.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is fine. That's all right. It'll be in the show notes that I'll put in there. But since we're on the subject, let me ask you. I don't know. Did you think in kind of building this original content in German for the German audience, and I think we keep using the word KNX, but that's the IoT standard in Europe.
Yeah.
Was that used as a way to get people more involved in Germany?
It's hard to know because for me, there were a few people that were interested in getting more engaged in the community in Germany, but the people that they dealt with, it seems like whether they were customers or internal people, the English there wasn't very great. People didn't speak English a lot, so I didn't really get to. I had several conversations with some German folks, but if I wanted to call the branches and things like that because they were off in some far off place in Germany, the English just was very broken and it was very difficult to communicate. Trust me, I tried. I remember calling a bunch of folks and they were like, don't understand what you're saying, basically. And so that part was hard, specifically for the community. Now that some of those things did happen in the U.S., in Canada, but I believe that our big win and things like that were both in France and Germany from a community standpoint. There was some big wins in Canada, as I mentioned. They were very excited about, but we didn't really do a lot of content. It was more of them getting their customers out there and asking questions. Another big problem with that was I didn't have anybody to answer those questions in Canada. Anyways, it's another issue that we.
Yeah, I don't know if this is part of it, and I think we said we'd talk a little bit about Elektrohelden separately, but one of the reasons we were looking at creating some of this original article content was that the community was being positioned a little bit differently from what we were originally doing in the United States. Remember, the United States was around product selection or helping you through your purchase cycle, right? Self-help type stuff. In this case, it was centered around the unspoken heroes, if you will, of
So you need to go backwards
society.
because you just said Elektrohelden and we've never mentioned that word.
Yeah. So Elektrohelden in German means the electrician heroes, right? In German. And that kind of naturally came up in some of our conversation because one of the things that I believe in kind of doing a community strategy is to understand what is the voice of the customer. What is the impetus? What is the thing that makes them proud to be a contributor, right? And one of the things that kind of comes up on a lot of our data is that electricians are a very proud group of individuals.
That's right.
They believe they're unsung because they are the ones that keeping the lights on. They're the ones that know, you may not know that they're an important part of society until shit happens.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like the most important people in the whole world. But yet they're just this not secret, but they're just this brotherhood, I think is the word that's used in the States. And in Germany, it's the same way, right? They believe that they were the unsung heroes. So this is the whole idea about electrician heroes.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where Elektrohelden comes in. And it seemed to speak well, right? It came across very, very well. So in part of that genre of electrician heroes, we were trying to give them, and the way we post the information was like, be the smarter person, or let me help you through. We know that you're having to know a lot of information.
Yeah.
Let us help you brush up on information. Let us help you so you can have a positive face in front of your clients, right? So you can always be that you can always be the hero.
Yeah, and that's how we came up with this name called Elektrohelden, because we had what we called the grid.rexel.com in North America, but we also had the grid.rexel.fr in France. But it just didn't resonate with the audience in Germany. So we rebranded the grid and we called it Elektrohelden and came up with its own logo and everything else. And that's, because of what Michael just said, Electric Heroes is why we came up with that. So then the French got upset and they wanted their own, but I don't think we ever got it. That was so funny.
That's right.
They did. I mean, they were begging for their own. We're like, fine, what do you want to call it? And they never could tell us, so we just kept it as the grid.
And it's interesting. Again, I'm very curious about how others had to find their community. Right? There's a lot of areas of thought. Is this a branded community, which means it's a community that comes from, it shares the brand of the company, right? You can create your own community that looks completely separate. This is a lot of like the like open source type of communities, right? They have their own brand. They don't want to be affiliated at all with any particular.
Folks like, and maybe that's not what you're talking about, but when you look at GitHub and those other things, you can have developer communities on there that represent maybe their brand or the brand they're on, but they're not, a branded community specifically, if that makes sense.
Yep. I remember.
I don't know if that means, if that's what we're talking about.
No, yeah. So when I was at Freescale, we started a community called riotboard.org, and that was a board that was trying to compete, and I think it's still a good competitive strategy with around Raspberry Pi and some of these others, but it was a community that received a lot of content from Freescale engineers. Right?
Okay.
And in some case, we didn't want to have we wanted to be we wanted to be free, that others can participate and it's not owned by a company.
Oh, you think developers think that, hey, if this is not part of that company, then maybe they'll get more engaged? Is that was kind of the
Yeah, so this is
thought,
going
or-
back to the whole idea of understanding your customer base, right? What is the voice? Like in this case, for developers,
I kind of like it.
yeah, for developers, they had this, their engineers, I'm being one of them, have a natural distrust, if you will, to big
Brands.
box brands, right?
Yeah.
But yet they will trust their peer, right? They'll trust their fellow, coder, if you will. So that's where a lot of the stuff makes sense. In this case, again, this is going back to the very beginning where we said, well, there must be value in the name Rexel, right? That's what we said it this way. But in this case, for Elektrohelden, there was value in the peer, right? So that's why we start off with Elektrohelden.
Yeah.
But we tied the brand to the Elektrohelden
That's right.
moniker, right? Because we call it electrohelden.rexel.com. I'm sorry, the brand in Germany is called Hagemeyer.
It was. Now it's Rexel.
Yeah, now it's Rexel, but at the time it was Hagemeyer. And
Let's back up because it's interesting because we didn't have a lot of we had a lot of SEO success, but we didn't have a lot of people joining the community. And the big reason in the beginning was because people in Germany don't trust, or they feel like if they even the employees felt like they weren't experts, so they didn't want to call themselves experts. And so if they mess up, then they're liable for all of that stuff. And so there was this huge kind of...
you bring up a good point. This is about the cultural definitions
Yeah.
of community for every country, right?
It was interesting to learn about the culture of Germany.
Absolutely. And for Americans, it's
I can
easy to
get
be
4,000 people, no problem.
Yeah,
To log
exactly.
in.
Oh, free T-shirt, no problem. But in Germany, there was so much like, who's going to be reading this? Is it okay to say these things? They wanted someone else to see it. And I even remember you had to put in some coding to remind
That's
those
right.
that were
That's right.
contributing that this is, don't say anything bad about the. I mean, it was just the amount of checks and balances that kind of went in.
It was...
But it was cultural, right? There was a
Very.
part of that culture. So, again, for community managers who are expanding their community, again, this sounds trite, but yes, you have to understand the culture. You have to understand the customers. What do they do? How do they react? Is this natural for them to talk online? If it isn't, how do you ease them into it? And even though as an American you may think, oh, pshaw, I don't need no stinking badge. No, if you want your community to be successful, you have to do these things, right? That's one of them. I remember that you had to do we had to do a lot of legal stuff. We had to have it reviewed by EU
my
law.
gosh.
I mean, we had,
It was insane.
it was insane, but it got launched, right? We pushed it out
Yeah, it
there.
was launched and
And what
we
was
made it happen.
what's very interesting, I know when you would talk to individuals, and you're right, there was a language barrier, but even with some of our colleagues in Germany,
Yep.
they would ask questions. Has this been blessed by, they would go down the list. Has legal seen this? Yes. Has marketing seen this? Yes.
Well, what's funny about that too is when I was talking to the French, they're like, "Was this approved by the Germans?" Because
That's right.
because if it's approved by the Germans,
There should be no problem for us.
then no problem for us. I'm like, all right. So if Germany approves certain things,
Yeah, by
from law,
de facto, by law, it
it's-
should be just fine.
it should be easy to get through.
Yeah.
that.
It was pretty funny. But again, this is going back to a conversation we had a podcast ago, which was, did we do this as a community manager? Yes. We were the ones in front of legal. We were the ones working with the marketing team,
Yes.
coming up with the moderation guidelines, training
Everything.
individuals. That's what you got to do. You gotta
Yeah,
push these things
it's
forward.
funny. A $14+ billion company, and you and I and this guy Jeff, that developer, just doing. Like I said, it was a third of our job, but a big part of it was community, and the shit that we got done was pretty amazing. If you think about it.
I mean, just on the legal side, up to that point, the company had never had a set of agreements blessed on the EU court and even on the US court around social contribution.
Yeah.
Or they never thought about how, because I would even ask this question. I said, surely a company this size would have some sort of way to understand what happens when an employee contributes externally, right? And they go, So, I mean, the groundwork we had to lay for the company pays off for them now, right? But it was, two guys just.
Yeah, I remember. That's right. I remember a story went to legal in the U.S. and this wasn't on Community, but it was around ratings and reviews. It's just about giving prizes and things like that. And so it was certainly eventually going to be around Community because we wanted to give customers gifts and stuff, shirts or whatever. But even the U.S. guy at Rexel was like, "Yeah, we've never done this before." I'm like, "Okay." I mean, because going digital is difficult, and they didn't have at the time a great digital presence. Now they had some websites and things like that, and and especially from a social digital standpoint, it was completely different.
Yeah, no, it is completely different. And again, this is all the fun part, right? This is how you start. I mean, for me, this is fun, right? For me, that is the fun part, is to go figure it out, put it on the whiteboard and say, okay, this is what we got to go do.
Yeah, if I look back, I think about how much fun I had. I mean, it was highly stressful for me at the time, but it's because I was in a realm that I didn't even completely understand, but I believed it, and I believe it even more now that I've been in it for several years. And so, it's a hard thing. If you look at the company I'm with now, I wouldn't say we're exactly similar, but it's still doing something that no one's done before. The company's been around for almost 20 years and doesn't have a community, which is crazy to think about. Our competitors have had communities for 10 years, and they tout that they have one company touts that they have 300,000 plus members. Yep. Now, that doesn't really mean a lot, but
correct.
But it is active, or it seems on the outside active, and so we're lagging behind. And so we're changing the way organizations think, the way organizations, maybe it's not completely thinking, but just the way we do business with our customers, because we've never really digitally done business with them and helped them the way we should be, right? Like Rexel, that was a big thing that we wanted to do, was help our customers make better buying decisions or good buying decisions.
Maybe that's actually a good way to end on this podcast, is around belief, right? Because I think that's another characteristic of a lot of community managers and community leaders do, which is we truly believe that this is the catalyst of change, right? And I think we've had this on many kind of private conversations as well before, is that you feel like you're the only one battling the battle, right? Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks who are out there who feel the same way too. You're not alone.
There's something said about not being alone, right? I could talk to a lot of people that feel the same way as me. Okay, good. I feel better.
Yeah, exactly. We've all been through it in some manner or fashion, and it's part of the reason why we want to talk about it. But with that, I know we were going to talk a little bit about how you get people excited on the community, but I think it was a good podcast to just talk about how we got Elektrohelden started on it for this podcast. But join us again next time. My name is Michael Sandoval.
And I'm Chris Detzel.
Thank you very much for listening.
All right, thanks.